huge menace, killed millions and millions of people. But it is also a blessing because it's because of malaria that the Europeans did not colonize Africa earlier. Maybe if they had done it earlier, maybe Africans today will not be existing. The people we call Africans today, most likely today, Africa will be like Australia or the North America. Despite Africa being at the doorstep of Europe, the Europeans first went to the Americas, the New World, South and North. They went to Australia, they went to Southeast Asia before they ever thought of coming to Africa. And malaria is the primary reason. Malaria, of course, and other diseases like the tsetse they were, very difficult to deal with. There was no medicine. The Europeans came to Africa only after discovering quinine, which was now the medicine that would be given to treat malaria. Now, the person who it is purported to have discovered that malaria is spread or caused by a mosquito is one Sir Ronald Ross. He was working in India in the late 19th century and dealing with patients there. He discovered a pattern that there was a relationship between the mosquito and malaria. And then, of course, he put it down, he did some research, and then he announced, of course, that, malaria is spread by mosquitoes. And he won a Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1902 for that discovery. But of course, that was not new knowledge. It's knowledge that had existed elsewhere for probably thousands of years. And as we are going to see from these writings by Richard Burton and H.G.C. Swain, the Somalis had this knowledge way before it was discovered. Richard Burton, of course, was a British, we could say he was an intelligence kind of guy. He was sent to Harar. He was going to Harar collect information because the British in the 1850s were interested in taking control of Berbera, which they actually later on took over in 1890s or 1880s. Now, in his book, First Steps in East Africa, he tells us about his journey. Now, it is when he arrives at Zeila, because that's the first place he arrives, that's where he tells us about this link between malaria and mosquito. He's told by the locals. And he's telling us about a house he was given or he was put to spend the night or to stay for a moment before he traveled to Harar. And then he says the houses are built to have a very high ceiling, and the reason for that is that it used to make it safer so that there are no flies and mosquitoes and things like that. So the Somalis understood some logic around that. Now is when he's telling us about that he mentions, of course, the mosquitoes, but then he does not talk about that knowledge within the text. He puts it in notes. And this is what he says in the notes. Fidmer, or the evening flyer, is a Somali name for a bat. So that is the bat, we know as the bat. These little animals are not disturbed in houses because they keep off flies and mosquitoes, the plagues of the Somali country. So he realized that in the houses of the Somalis, they built it high roof so that the bats can stay within the house, and there was a reason for that. When the bats are within the house, they will eat the flies and the mosquitoes. He continues, flies abound in the very jungle wherever cows have been, and settle in swamps upon the traveler. Before the monsoon, their bite is painful, especially that of the small green species. And there is a red variety called Dixie, whose venom, according to the people, causes them to vomit. So these are flies, the outside flies, the house flies. Seems like there were a lot of them, of course. During certain seasons in East Africa, you will have a lot of flies. He says the latter abounds in the gulleys and the hills ranges of the Berbera country. It is innocuous during the cold season. Now, let's come to the mosquito. He says the mosquito bites bring on, according to the same authority, deadly fevers. The superstition probably arises from the fact that mosquitoes and fevers become formidable about the same time. So he calls it superstition. He says this superstition likely came up because mosquitoes appear at the same time as these fevers appear. So it's that thing of correlation does not necessarily translate to causation, which is a good way or good framework or when you are dealing with ideas. But in this case, it became an obstacle for Richard Burton and other Europeans to realize actually there must be a relationship between the mosquitoes and this malaria thing. But this is 1850s, remember. This is close to 50 years before there is an official discovery that mosquitoes spread malaria. Now, let's see what H.G.C. Swain writes about that. This is now for H.G.C. Swain. He went to the Horn of Africa in the 1885. He was part of the early British officers to be sent to what came to be known as British Somaliland, and he did a lot of work around doing survey work, trying to survey the lands of the Somalis, or the lands that were going to form part of the British protectorate. And he was traveling around, and at some point, he catches him or his some of the people he was traveling with, I think could be his brother or one of the people, they catch malaria. And after they catch malaria, they are told, the locals tell them that this is caused by actually the mosquitoes. And we're going to see what he says. I'm going to read the main text and then read the note. He also writes it in the notes. He does not write it within the text. Now, this is the text before the notes. My brother marched down to Loi Ada between Djibouti and Zeila to have a look at palm tree, which is supposed to mark the boundary between French and British spheres of influence. Here he had an amusing conversation in the pitch darkness with a French officer who thought he was trying to break the cholera quarantine. The two parties of 20 men or so standing opposite each other under arms. This awkwardness was followed by an explanation, my brother expressing regret that through long absence in the interior, he had no knowledge of the quarantine, and the Frenchman apologizing for having received him should appear under misapprehension. And there followed a pleasant breakfast with this official who said he lived at Djibouti. Now, the brother at this point, H.G.C. Swain, is traveled elsewhere, and the brother goes to this point and he meets this. It looks like it's the boundary between Djibouti and British Somaliland then, and he's having this conversation with this French guy. It turns out there was a quarantine of a cholera. The brother to Swain didn't know about it. He continues, a few days before reaching Zeila, my brother caravan was struck down with sickness caused by bad water, several men having to be left at Ambo's police hut, and many more coming into Zeila strapped on camels. Now, there is something that happens to the men who are traveling with H.G.C. Swain's brother. Many of them become sick. Now, he attributes this to bad water, that they drank maybe not so clean water, and then they got some disease. He continues, I rode 50 miles on a very hot day with a native Indian hospital assistant and medicine in pursuit of my brother, but found he had come to Zeila by another route. Arriving at Zeila, we paid off the caravan and returned to Aden. This was the last trip made in company of my brother. Now, it is under that paragraph somewhere that he puts a note to EC1. Now, he explains it like this. He says, Somalis themselves denied that the sickness was caused by bad water, declaring that the real cause was the bites of mosquitoes. These pests, called can-ad, are not generally present in eastern Somaliland, but are common at certain spots on the coast between Berbera and Zeila, on the Zeila-Harar routes, and in the Gadabursi country. They are also found near the well bay, and when they are the tribes from Berbera who are not accustomed to mosquitoes, have great dread of their bites, believing malaria fever to be caused by them. So he also sort of says it is superstition because he says believing. The people knew that you needed to be very careful not to be bitten by mosquitoes, but because you are likely to catch some fever, malaria. But H.G. Swain, of course, is not convinced. For him, he's thinking the people who got sick is because they drank some bad water. But the locals tell him, no, it's not bad water. These people have been bitten by mosquitoes. And the people feared mosquitoes because they understood what mosquitoes were. Now, I find these notes to be, both books, of course, is notes, to be very interesting, to be really interesting. And especially for H.G.C. Swain, it's even more interesting because this book is probably written in 1893, 1894. Of course, he was taking notes from probably 1888 or 1886. Still, is very close to the time 1897 when Sir Ronald Rose in India discovers the link between mosquitoes and malaria. Now, when you read such books or such information from such books, especially the 19th century books, and then you see something like that. It makes me to be so unsure about many things that today are called superstitions, many things that Africans probably believe or do, and it say, oh, that's those voodoo or superstition. People just believe weird stuff that is not actually factual, it's not based on any science. I become very unsure about it because I'm like, there is a probability that maybe in the next 100, 200 years, some of the things that probably Africans, not just Africans, of course, to be fair, generally people around the world, some of the things that we think today that are just superstitions might actually turn out to be based in very concrete science. I think that is highly likely, going by this, that the 1850s and even early 1890s, the Europeans believed that the thinking that mosquitoes had anything to do with malaria or superstition. That makes me think that probably there are many other things today we believe to be superstition, but actually there is science. It's just that we've not connected the dot. We've not discovered, as he said, discovered, or probably because the right people have not approved that this is actually science. Maybe when the right people do it, then things are going to change. Yeah, found that to be very, very, very interesting. Those are my random thoughts.